This is my true story. I loved my wife more than anything. I worked from sunrise to sunset just to see her smile, to give her comfort, to build a life we could be proud of. But one morning, she looked at me with cold eyes and said, "You'll never be enough for me." She packed her things, got into a rich man's car, and never looked back. My world ended that day. But time is strange. It breaks you, then makes you stronger. 10 years later, she saw me again. Only this time, she called me sir. Before I tell you what happened, tell me where you're watching from, and please subscribe so my story can reach more people. She left me without a single tear. I still remember that morning like it was carved into my chest. The sun had barely risen, and I was sitting at the table with 2 cups of tea, one for her, one for me, the same way I did every day. But that morning, she didn't even sit down. She walked straight past me with her bag already packed. I asked her where she was going, but she didn't answer. Her face looked different, cold, sharp, empty. She didn't see a husband anymore. She saw a man who had nothing left to give her. She stood by the door, took off her wedding ring, and placed it on the table beside my cup. The sound it made when it hit the wood was small, but it echoed louder than any scream. She looked at me and said, "I'm tired of living poor. You'll never be enough for me." Then she turned around and walked out. No hug, no goodbye, no hesitation. Just gone. I ran to the window and saw her get into a black car waiting outside. A man in a suit opened the door for her, and she smiled at him. The same smile I used to wake up for. That smile was now his. The car drove away, leaving behind silence that felt like a grave. I sat there for hours, staring at the ring she left behind. It was small, cheap, the best I could afford back then. To her, it had become worthless. To me, it was everything. I held it in my hand, and for the first time in years, I felt truly alone. There was no anger, not yet, just emptiness. A kind of pain that doesn't shout. It just sits inside you and eats you alive. The neighbors found out quickly. They always do. They whispered when I passed by. Some pitied me, others laughed. They said she had moved up, that she was living in a big house now, wearing gold, driving new cars. People told me I should feel angry, that I should curse her name. But I didn't. I couldn't. You don't stop loving someone overnight, even when they crush you. Love doesn't die when someone walks away. It just changes shape, turns into silence, turns into work, turns into survival. I went to work that same day, pretending nothing had happened. My co-workers didn't ask questions, but I saw the pity in their eyes. Every break, I sat alone, staring at my hands, wondering what I had done wrong. Was I really not enough? I had given her everything I had. Maybe not riches, but love, loyalty, effort. But love doesn't fill empty hearts that crave money. I realized too late that she didn't want a partner. She wanted a ladder. At night, I would sit in our small house, her chair empty, her clothes gone, her voice gone. The silence was unbearable. The house smelled like her perfume for weeks, and every time I caught it, my chest tightened. I used to imagine her laughing somewhere else, drinking wine in a big dining room, wearing dresses I could never buy her. I hoped, stupidly, that maybe one day she'd remember the man who carried her through the hard days, the man who once skipped meals so she could eat. But she never called. Not once. I saw her once by accident, a few months later. She was getting out of that same black car with her new husband. They looked happy, confident, untouchable. I was on the other side of the street, covered in dust from work, my hands rough and blistered. She saw me. For a moment, our eyes met. Then she looked away like I was a stranger. That look, that one look, hurt more than anything she had ever said. It was the moment I realized I no longer existed in her world. That night, I went home, sat on the floor, and made myself a promise. I wouldn't chase her. I wouldn't beg. I wouldn't curse her name. But I would rise again, not to make her jealous, not to get her back, but to prove to myself that I was not never enough. I was more than what she saw. I just had to become the man I was meant to be. Not for her, but for me. After she left, my whole world collapsed piece by piece. It didn't happen all at once. It was slow, quiet, cruel. Like a house falling apart in the rain, one brick at a time. Our small business, the one we had built together, started to fail. Customers stopped coming. Bills piled up. I tried to keep it running, but my heart wasn't in it anymore. Every corner of that shop reminded me of her. The desk where she used to sit. The receipts written in her handwriting. The smell of her perfume that still lingered in the air. I couldn't focus. My mind was trapped in the past. People talked. They said she had married rich, that her new husband was powerful, that she was living like a queen. They said I should move on, find someone else. But how do you move on when the person who walked away took all your faith with them? I stopped sleeping properly. Every night I'd lie awake, staring at the ceiling, thinking about what I could have done differently. Maybe if I'd worked harder. Maybe if I'd bought her more things. Maybe if I hadn't believed love was enough. Money ran out fast. I sold my watch, then my car, then the small gold chain she once gave me on my birthday. It hurt to let it go, but hunger hurts more than memories. I remember one night, I sat in the dark eating bread and water for dinner, my hands shaking from exhaustion. I was so tired, not from work, but from trying to keep hope alive when there was nothing left to hope for. My friends stopped visiting. They didn't want to be near failure. In their eyes, I had become a sad story. The man whose wife left him for money. They avoided me like my pain was contagious. I stopped blaming them after a while. People don't like to stand next to broken things. It reminds them how easily life can turn. The debts grew. The bank came for the shop. I watched strangers carry away the shelves, the furniture, the last pieces of the dream we once shared. It was like losing her all over again. When the door closed for the final time, I stood outside, staring at the empty sign, and felt like my own name had been erased from the world. After that, I drifted. I took whatever work I could find, cleaning jobs, delivery work, anything that paid enough to buy food. There were nights I slept in cheap rooms that smelled of mold, mornings where I looked in the mirror and barely recognized myself. My face had aged fast, my eyes dull, my shoulders heavy. But even then, something inside me refused to die. Some small part of me kept whispering that I wasn't finished yet. Once, while delivering boxes to an office, I saw a woman who looked just like her. For a moment, my heart stopped. But when she turned, it wasn't her. Still, that moment stayed with me. It reminded me that she was out there somewhere, living a life she thought was better. And I was here, rebuilding mine from ashes. It hurt. But it also pushed me. Pain can destroy you, or it can wake you up. I chose to let it wake me. The lowest point came when I couldn't afford rent anymore. I packed what little I had into a bag and walked out without a destination. I remember sitting on a bench that night, watching people rush home to their families and wondering if I'd ever have that again. I didn't have answers, but I had breath, and that was enough. I told myself that if I could survive the night, I could survive the year. And if I could survive the year, I could survive anything. That was the night I made a decision. I wouldn't let my story end like this. She had walked away, but I was still standing. My heart was broken, but my will wasn't. If life had taken everything from me, I'd take it back, piece by piece. Not through anger, but through work, through silence, through the kind of strength that no one can see until it's too late to stop it. The struggle started quietly, like a slow climb out of a deep, dark hole. I had nothing left but my hands, my health, and my will. I started with small jobs, cleaning construction sites, loading trucks, fixing broken furniture for a few coins. It wasn't much, but it kept me alive. Every day felt like a battle between giving up and holding on. I'd wake up before dawn, wash my face with cold water, and tell myself, just one more day. That became my rhythm. Survive one more day, and then another, and then another. The world doesn't care about broken men. When you fall, no one reaches out. You either learn to crawl again, or you stay in the dirt. I learned to crawl. I worked for people who looked down on me, people who paid late, shouted loudly, and treated me like I was invisible. I didn't argue. I needed the work more than I needed pride. Pride doesn't feed you. But somewhere deep inside, a small fire was still burning. Every insult, Every long night, every time someone called me old man or failure, I stored it quietly. I didn't fight back, but I remembered. At night, I studied. Not for school, not for anyone. For myself. I read about business, about management, about people who started from nothing and built their empires with their bare hands. I didn't have a teacher or money for courses, so I borrowed books, old newspapers, anything I could find. I wanted to understand how the world worked. Not the world of feelings that had betrayed me, but the world of power that had ignored me. There were nights I couldn't afford food, so I drank water and went to bed. My stomach growled, my back ached, but I never stopped. Pain became my teacher. Hunger became my motivation. Every hardship felt like another test I had to pass before life gave me a second chance. I told myself that if I could survive the betrayal, I could survive anything. And slowly, I began to believe it. One day, I met an old friend who worked in a small factory. He offered me a job as a helper. It wasn't glamorous, but it was steady. I accepted without hesitation. I swept floors, fixed broken tools, carried boxes, and learned everything I could about the machines, the workers, and the system. I watched how things moved, how money flowed, how leaders made decisions, how people followed strength. The owner noticed my dedication and started giving me small responsibilities. That was the first time in years someone trusted me again. I saved every penny. No new clothes, no luxuries, no distractions. I ate simple meals, wore the same shoes until they tore apart, and kept my head down. Slowly, my savings grew. I didn't tell anyone my plans. People talk too much when they don't understand quiet ambition. I wanted my actions to speak, not my words. When I had enough, I left the factory and started my own small repair shop. Just a few tools, one rented space, and a dream that I wasn't ready to bury yet. The first few months were hard. No customers, no reputation, just me sitting there every day, waiting. But hard work always finds its reward. One client led to another. Slowly, my hands that once built a broken marriage began to build a new future. I still thought about her sometimes. The woman who left me behind. I wondered if she was happy. I wondered if she ever missed me. But the more I worked, the less it hurt. Work doesn't erase pain, but it gives it somewhere to go. It turns heartbreak into movement, into progress, into strength. Years passed, and my small shop grew into a company. I hired people, expanded to new places, and built something solid, something no one could take away from me this time. My name started to mean something again. People who once ignored me started greeting me with respect. I didn't smile much, but inside, I felt alive for the first time in a long while. I didn't know it yet, but the same world that once laughed at me, the same people who called me poor, weak, and nothing, were about to see what a broken man looks like when he decides to rebuild himself from dust. The climb was slow, painful, and lonely. There was no miracle, no luck, just years of sweat, sleepless nights, and silent determination. I started my mornings before sunrise and ended them long after midnight. My hands were always sore, my eyes always heavy, but I never stopped. Every small profit I made, I reinvested. Every mistake I made, I studied. I learned to see failure as a lesson, not as a wall. The more people doubted me, the harder I pushed. I didn't want revenge anymore. I wanted peace. I wanted to build something that would stand long after my pain was gone. I remember the first time I signed a contract with a big client. It was a small deal compared to what I'd later achieve, but that moment felt like a mountain. I looked at my name on the paper and thought about the man I used to be, the one sitting alone, heartbroken, worthless. That man had died the day she walked out, and from his ashes, someone stronger had been born. I didn't have much, but I had something more powerful than money, discipline. And that discipline built my new life one brick at a time. As my business grew, people began to notice. Some remembered how I used to struggle, how I worked for pennies. They came with praise now, pretending they had always believed in me. I smiled politely, but never forgot. I had learned that people respect success, not effort. They love winners, but abandon fighters. That realization hardened me, made me colder, but also sharper. I learned to trust actions, not words. The more I grew, the more I invested, not in luxury, but in expansion. I bought equipment, hired workers, opened new branches. I built a team of people who once struggled like I did. I didn't care about fancy suits or big offices. I cared about growth. I cared about being unshakable. Soon, the company that began in a rented room became something bigger than I had ever dreamed. But success is quiet at first. It doesn't shout. It builds slowly while no one's looking. By the time people notice, it's too late to stop it. 1 year turned into 5, and 5 into 10. My company was everywhere now. My name had weight again. The same banks that once rejected me were now calling to offer loans. The same people who mocked my poverty now asked for jobs. I had finally climbed out of the pit I'd been thrown into. Not with anger, but with persistence. I often thought about her during those years. Not with love or hatred, but with understanding. She had chosen comfort over loyalty. I had chosen pain over surrender. In the end, our choices built our destinies. I didn't know where she was, didn't care to ask, but sometimes I wondered what she'd say if she saw me now. The man she once called, not enough. I wasn't rich yet, not the kind of rich her world admired, but I was powerful in a way money alone couldn't define. I had built something real. Then came the turning point. A large corporation offered a partnership. I took the risk. It worked. My company expanded internationally. For the first time in my life, I could breathe without worry. I could sleep without fear. I had enough money to live 10 lifetimes, but I still woke up early every day because hard work had become part of my blood. Still, there was an emptiness that success couldn't fill. I had everything I thought I wanted: wealth, respect, stability, but no one to share it with. My house was big, but quiet. My table was full, but I ate alone. That's when I realized something cruel about life. It gives you what you worked for, but not always what you lost. One evening, as I sat in my office signing another deal, my assistant came in with a file. It was a list of companies we were buying next quarter. I didn't pay much attention until one name caught my eye. My pen froze mid-signature. I read it again slowly. Axton Holdings. My heart skipped. That name, that company, belonged to her husband, the man she left me for. I leaned back in my chair, silent. 10 years of pain, struggle, and rebuilding had brought me right here, to the edge of irony itself. I didn't plan revenge, but life did it for me. When I saw that name, Axton Holdings, on the document, I couldn't move for a while. It felt like time had stopped. My heart didn't race, my hands didn't shake. I just sat there, staring at the paper. It was almost unbelievable. The company that once symbolized everything I had lost was now sitting in front of me, waiting to be signed over into my name. Life had gone full circle, without warning, without noise. I didn't smile. I didn't feel joy or triumph. What I felt was heavier, something like justice, but colder. I hadn't looked for them in years. I didn't even know what had become of her or the man she left me for. The last time I saw her, she was glowing in luxury, wearing gold, stepping out of cars I could never afford. And here I was now, sitting in a room that was bigger than that car, holding the power to own everything they had built together. Life doesn't forget. It just waits. I asked my assistant for a full report on the acquisition. When I read it, I saw how deep their fall had been. The company was drowning in debt. The rich man she chose was no longer the powerful figure people once feared. He had made bad deals, taken bigger risks, and lost control. Their empire was cracking from the inside. I closed the file and sat back, silent. There was a strange ache in my chest, not out of pity, but out of realization. She had left me for this. She had traded loyalty for comfort, and now even that comfort was gone. For a long time, I stared at the city through my window. 10 years ago, I had been walking those streets with torn shoes and empty pockets. Now, I looked down at them from the top floor of a building with my name on it. The irony was sharp. I thought about calling her just to see what she'd say. But I didn't. This wasn't revenge. This was truth. And truth doesn't need to announce itself. It just stands quietly, undeniable. The deal went through quickly. My lawyers handled everything. I didn't even have to attend the meetings. The man she left me for, her husband, didn't even know who the new buyer was. That was the best part. He thought he was negotiating with another firm, another faceless investor. He never realized that the man he stole her away from now owned the company he was begging to save. That's how quiet power works. It doesn't shout. It just moves. I remember the night before the final approval. I couldn't sleep, not because I was excited, but because my mind was full of old memories. I remembered the day she walked out, the sound of that car door closing, the look in her eyes when she said I wasn't enough. That wound had stayed open for years, buried under work and silence. Now life was closing it for me, not with kindness, but with balance. I didn't need to hurt her. Fate had already done that. The next morning, I signed the final document. Just one signature, one small motion of the hand, and everything that had once belonged to her and her rich husband became mine. I didn't feel joy. I didn't feel hate. I just felt finished. Like a long story had finally found its last line. After the papers were signed, my assistant asked me if I wanted to visit the company in person. At first I said no. But later that night, something in me changed. I realized I wanted to see it. Not for revenge, but for closure. I wanted to see the place she had chosen over me. I wanted to see the world she had thought was better than mine. Not to gloat. Just to stand there, look around, and silently know how far I had come. So I agreed to visit. I told no one who I was. I wanted to walk in quietly, just another businessman inspecting a new asset. I didn't know then that life had one more twist waiting for me, one that would make everything come full circle in a way even I wasn't ready for. The acquisition happened faster than I expected. One morning, I woke up and realized the company that once represented my biggest heartbreak was now listed under my ownership. I didn't even need to lift a finger. My lawyers had handled everything. The papers, the signatures, the transfers. What once belonged to the man she left me for was now mine in silence. There were no arguments, no fights, no revenge plans. Just numbers, legal terms, and a few quiet handshakes that changed everything. It was strange. The biggest victory of my life came without noise, without applause, without anyone even realizing it. When the documents arrived, I sat alone in my office and flipped through every page. Each line was clean, each seal official. My company had absorbed theirs completely. The brand name, the buildings, the employees, everything. Even their debt now belonged to me, but I didn't mind. I had learned how to rebuild from worse. What struck me most wasn't the power or the success, but the thought of her. I hadn't seen her in 10 years, and now, without either of us knowing, she was back under my roof. Except this time, I was the one holding the pen. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the last page where my name stood next to theirs. The same name she once called useless. The same name she said would never be enough. Now it was written above everything she had chased after. The moment didn't feel like triumph. It felt like peace. Like life had finally set the record straight without me having to say a single word. A few days later, I received an email from the transition department of Axton Holdings. They requested my visit to oversee management alignment and staff introductions. I hesitated. I could have sent one of my directors, but something in me wanted to go. Not out of pride or curiosity, but because I needed to see it, the place where she had spent the last 10 years. The place she had chosen over me. I wanted to see what remained of the life she thought was better. When the day came, I wore a plain suit. Nothing fancy, nothing loud. I didn't want anyone to think I came to boast. I was calm. My driver took me to the head office. As we pulled up, I recognized the logo immediately. It used to make me feel small when I saw it printed on billboards. It had once been a symbol of what I couldn't give her. Now it was just another line on my company's asset list. That realization didn't make me proud. It made me quiet. Inside, the lobby was grand, but tired. The walls had cracks, the plants were dry, the gold letters on the wall had lost their shine. The empire she chose was rotting from within. Employees walked fast, eyes tired, faces stressed. The air felt heavy. Success without soul always looks like that, impressive from afar, empty up close. The receptionist greeted me and offered to inform management that I had arrived. I nodded and waited near the counter. My eyes wandered around the place, not looking for anything in particular. And then I saw her. She was standing behind the desk, arranging files. For a second, my mind refused to believe it. Her hair was shorter, her face thinner, her movements slower. But it was her. The woman who had once left me without a word was now standing just a few feet away, wearing the same company badge that bore my name. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I just watched her. Life had brought us back together, not as lovers, not even as equals, but as strangers connected by a silent truth she didn't yet know. She didn't notice me. She was too focused on her work, too busy surviving in the world she had once chosen. For a brief moment, I felt something deep, not revenge, not anger, but pity. The kind of pity that comes from seeing how time humbles us all. Then the manager called me in, and I turned away. She still didn't see me. She didn't know that the man she once called worthless now owned every wall around her. But she would find out soon enough. Life doesn't hide truths forever. It reveals them when the moment is right. And that moment was coming faster than either of us expected. I went back to that building a few weeks later. The first visit had been official. Papers, meetings, signatures. But this time, I went quietly, without assistants or lawyers. I wanted to see things for myself, to feel what time had done to the place and to her. My name was now on every contract. But I wanted to walk through those halls not as an owner, but as a man who had once been left behind. I wanted to face it, to see the reality that money had built for her after she traded our life for luxury. It was early morning when I arrived. The office was just opening. The guards greeted me without recognizing who I was. My face had aged, but my eyes still carried purpose. I stepped into the elevator, pressed the top floor button, and watched the numbers rise. Each floor felt like another year I had spent clawing my way back to this moment. When the doors opened, the same lobby I had seen before appeared. Clean, cold, silent. I could hear the faint hum of machines, the shuffle of papers, the distant sound of someone giving instructions. And then I saw her again. She was standing behind the reception desk, arranging folders, her head slightly lowered. Her once soft hands were rougher now, her shoulders bent. The gold jewelry was gone. The glow, too. The woman who used to walk through life with pride was now moving carefully, quietly, like someone afraid to make mistakes. I stood still for a while, watching her. The years had changed her. The sharpness in her face had faded, replaced by exhaustion. She looked like someone who had been holding herself together for too long. I stepped forward. The sound of my shoes on the marble floor caught her attention. She looked up, her eyes meeting mine for a second, and then moved away, not recognizing me. She smiled politely, the kind of smile employees give to strangers. She asked if I had an appointment. Her voice was softer, lower. It was the same voice that once told me I would never be enough, but now it trembled slightly, as if life had taken its strength away. I told her I was there to inspect the office. She nodded and stood aside, gesturing toward the hallway. For a few moments, I walked past her desk, feeling my heart beat slowly, heavily. I could sense the weight of irony pressing on every breath I took. She had left me for a man who promised her a better life. Now, she was standing in a building owned by the man she abandoned, wearing a name tag that represented my company. And she didn't even know it yet. I sat with the management team, discussing figures and plans, but my mind wasn't in the meeting. I kept thinking about her, about how life had placed her right where she never thought she'd be. When the meeting ended, I walked back toward the lobby. She was still there, typing something on the computer, unaware of what was coming. I stopped near her desk, and for a moment the air around us felt still. I looked at her closely, and this time she met my eyes properly. I could see confusion flicker across her face. That small, uncertain look people get when something feels familiar but they can't place it. I could almost see her thoughts racing, trying to remember who I was. I didn't say my name. I just looked at her and spoke in the same calm tone I had used 1,000 times before when I came home tired from work years ago. "Is your manager available?" The moment she heard my voice, everything inside her changed. Her hand froze mid-motion. The color drained from her face. Her lips parted slightly as she whispered, barely audible, "Sir?" The word hung in the air between us like a memory coming back from the dead. I didn't flinch. I simply nodded and replied, "Yes. You can call me sir now." She stared at me, eyes wide, breathing unevenly. Her mind was catching up with the truth. The man she left for poverty was now standing in front of her, powerful, composed, unreachable. I didn't need to say anything else. I didn't need to remind her of the past. The moment itself spoke louder than any words I could have ever said. I turned and walked toward the exit, leaving her standing behind the desk, trembling. The years had taken many things from me: love, youth, pride, but they had given me something greater. Time. Time to rebuild, time to rise, and time to let life deliver justice in its own quiet, perfect way. When I walked out of that building that day, I thought that was the end of it. I thought the moment she saw me, called me sir, and stood frozen in silence was enough. But life wasn't done yet. The next morning, I received a message from the HR director of the company. He said one of the employees from reception had requested a personal meeting with the new owner. I didn't need to ask who. I already knew. My first instinct was to ignore it, to let the past stay buried where it belonged. But something in me, maybe curiosity, maybe old love, maybe unfinished pain, told me to see it through. So, I said yes. When she entered my office later that week, the room went quiet. It was as if the air itself stopped moving. She stood at the door, holding her bag in both hands, her eyes lowered, afraid to look at me. The same woman who once walked out of my life with pride now stood trembling, unable to speak. I told her to sit, and she hesitated, like she didn't deserve the chair in front of me. Her hands were shaking. I could see how much life had changed her. The wrinkles, the tiredness, the humility that money had never taught her before. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. I just watched her, remembering everything she had once been, the laughter, the warmth, the dreams we shared when the world was still kind. She finally looked up, and when her eyes met mine, I saw something I hadn't seen before: guilt. Real, heavy guilt. Her lips trembled as she whispered, "I didn't know it was you." I didn't respond. I wanted her to keep talking, to let the truth pour out. She took a deep breath and said quietly, "When I left you, I thought I was making the right choice. I thought I'd found a better life. But I was wrong. So wrong." She told me everything: how her new husband's wealth had blinded her, how she got used to luxury, how she believed she'd finally escaped poverty. But over the years, she said, the gold started to fade. The man she married became cold and cruel. He controlled her, insulted her, made her feel small. The same comfort she had chased turned into a cage. And when the business began to fall apart, he blamed her. He took everything and left her with nothing. She said she had been working as a receptionist ever since. For years, in the same building, pretending to still be someone important. I sat there, listening quietly. Her words didn't make me happy. They didn't make me feel powerful. They just made me tired. I had already lived through my pain. I didn't need to see hers. There was no joy in her suffering, only proof that life really does balance its debts. When she finally stopped talking, she looked at me, tears welling in her eyes, and whispered, "I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that I see it now. I see who you were. And I see what I became." Her words hit hard. For years I had dreamed of this moment, not because I wanted revenge, but because I wanted her to understand. I wanted her to see that I wasn't the man she thought was beneath her. But now that it was here, I didn't feel victory. I just felt closure. Quiet, heavy closure. I told her calmly that I had nothing left to prove, that the past was gone, and that she didn't owe me anything. But she shook her head and said, "No, I owe you everything." I just realized it too late. There was silence again. She stood up slowly, wiped her tears, and said she would resign. I didn't stop her. I simply nodded. As she walked out, she paused at the door and whispered one last word. "Goodbye." I didn't answer. Some goodbyes don't need words. They just hang in the air and follow you long after the person is gone. When the door closed, I leaned back in my chair and let out a long breath. My chest felt lighter. The wound that had once bled for years finally closed completely. Not because she apologized, but because I no longer needed her to. The man she left behind had died a long time ago. The man sitting in that chair now had peace, and peace was worth more than any revenge. After she left my office that day, I sat there for a long time, staring at the empty chair she had been sitting in. The room was silent, but my mind was loud. Every memory of our life together came rushing back. The laughter, the small dinners, the nights we planned a future we never reached. For a moment, it almost felt like time had folded in on itself, like I was back in that old house again, watching her walk away with her suitcase. But this time, it was different. This time, she was the one walking away broken. Life had reversed our roles, and I was the one left standing. The next few days, I learned that she really had resigned. She didn't even collect her last paycheck. She just vanished, the same way she had 10 years before. No calls, no letters, no explanations. But unlike the first time, I didn't wait for her. I didn't sit by the window hoping she would return. I didn't chase her car. This time, I let her go in silence. Because now I understood something cruel about love. Sometimes the only way to win is to walk away without looking back. Still, the emptiness stayed for a while. I tried to focus on work, on meetings, on the constant hum of business, but my thoughts kept drifting. I wondered where she went, if she had anywhere to go. I wondered if she still had anyone left. A part of me, no matter how much I tried to ignore it, still cared. That's the hardest part about being human. Even when you're right, your heart still aches for the people who hurt you. I told myself I was done, but my soul still whispered her name in quiet moments. Weeks passed, and news started spreading. Her husband, the rich man she left me for, had been arrested for fraud. Everything they owned was gone. The house, the cars, the money, all seized. She had nothing. Some of my employees whispered about it, not realizing I could hear them. They said she was seen in a small neighborhood, living in a rented room, looking thinner, older, and lost. I listened without reacting. I didn't gloat, didn't smile, didn't say a word. Life had already delivered the punishment I never asked for. I didn't need to add cruelty to what fate had already done. One evening, after everyone had left the office, I sat alone and opened the drawer where I kept old things. Photos, letters, memories I should have thrown away long ago. There was one picture of us, taken when we were still young, still foolish, still dreaming. I looked at it for a long time. She was smiling, holding my hand. Back then, we had nothing but hope, and somehow, that was enough. I realized that the woman in that photo had died long before she ever left me. The one who came to my office weeks ago was only what was left after greed had stripped everything good from her. I closed the drawer and turned off the lights. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't hurt. I was simply done. She had called me sir because she no longer had the right to call me anything else. The title she gave me that day wasn't about power. It was about truth. She finally saw the difference between wealth and worth. The next morning, as I drove through the city, I passed by the old street where we used to live. The little shop we once ran was gone, replaced by a cafe. I parked nearby and sat for a while, watching people walk by. No one knew who I was. No one knew what story lived inside me, and I liked it that way. Sometimes peace isn't found in revenge or recognition. It's found in finally being free from needing either. As I sat there, I realized something. The collapse wasn't hers alone. We both had fallen once, she from pride, me from heartbreak. The difference was that I learned how to rebuild. She didn't. The world had taken everything from me once, but I had built it all again with my bare hands. And now, life had taken everything from her, not because I wanted it, but because she had built her world on someone else's lies. When I left that street, I didn't look back. The man who once begged her to stay no longer existed. The man who drove away that morning had made peace with his past. I didn't need her to suffer, and I didn't need her to remember. It was enough that life had reminded her who I truly was, not the poor man she left behind, but the man she should have believed in. Justice didn't come with noise or celebration. It came in silence, slow, steady, and exact. I didn't plan it. I didn't chase it. I simply lived long enough for truth to do its work. Life has a strange way of balancing things. It doesn't forget who was kind when no one noticed, and it doesn't ignore those who threw kindness away. It just waits for the right moment. And when that moment comes, it doesn't shout. It whispers. It was in that whisper that I finally found my peace. Months passed after she resigned. The world moved on, and so did I. My company grew stronger, expanding into new markets, hiring better people, opening more offices. I focused on work, on the people who stayed loyal, on building a future without looking backward. But no matter how far I went, every now and then, a memory would surface. Her laughter, her face in the morning light, her voice when she once said we'd grow old together. It wasn't pain anymore. It was just an old echo, fading slowly with time. One day I was invited to a charity event. It was organized by one of the local community centers. I almost didn't go. I rarely attended public events. But something inside me said I should. When I arrived, I noticed a small group of volunteers handing out food and blankets to the poor. And among them, standing quietly in a plain dress, was her. My chest tightened, not from anger, but from disbelief. She looked older now, her hair streaked with gray, her face tired but calm. She wasn't surrounded by luxury anymore. She wasn't wearing jewelry or pretending to be someone she wasn't. She was just there, helping others, quietly, without asking for attention. I didn't approach her. I stood at a distance and watched. She didn't see me, and maybe that was for the best. She smiled faintly as she handed a blanket to a small child. For the first time in years, I saw a glimpse of the woman I once loved, not the one who chased wealth, but the one who had once held my hand in hard times and said everything would be okay. It hit me then that life had already given her the biggest punishment of all: understanding. When people finally see the truth about their mistakes, it hurts more than any pain someone else could give them. I left quietly, without saying a word. I didn't need her to see me. I didn't need her to know that I was there. Seeing her like that, stripped of pride, living simply, doing something good, was enough. That was justice. Not revenge, not humiliation, not payback. Just the natural balance of life returning everything to where it belonged. She had learned humility. I had learned peace. And both of us had finally let go of what destroyed us. When I got home that night, I sat by the window and thought about everything that had happened. 10 years ago, I was a broken man. I had nothing. Not love, not money, not hope. She had taken all of that when she left. But now, as I looked around, at the life I had built, at the calm inside me, I realized something powerful. She hadn't taken anything from me. She had only delayed my rise. Losing her had been painful, but it had also been necessary. Some people leave not to hurt you, but to clear the path for who you're meant to become. I poured myself a cup of tea, the same way I used to all those years ago. Only this time, the cup across the table stayed empty on purpose. I didn't need anyone sitting there to feel whole. The man I had become no longer needed validation, love, or apology. I had built something far greater, a life that stood strong, built on pain, patience, and truth. That night, before I went to bed, I whispered softly into the quiet room. Life always comes full circle. Because it does. It might take years, it might take decades, But it always finds its way back to balance. The woman who left me for wealth learned the value of love, and the man she left behind learned the power of self-worth. And that was the real justice, not her downfall, but my peace.